So I wanted to go into a little bit about what we're trying to do in the world of David and his mighty men. So one of the things we work in Progress Animation Studios that we wanted to deal with in this project was a lot of stories about David have been just that, just focusing on David. And David's story as a king, there's a notion in Judaism that the king is the people and the people is the king. And that David as king is really meaningless if he didn't have people who he served. And in that process of becoming king, there were people that gathered around them, and they all have stories. So David's story isn't just a story about a shepherd boy facing giants and all that. That is good. That's a powerful story. And that's kind of where we begin as a series, is moving towards that in our pilot that we're working on. But really, that launches a much bigger story. There's a lot of people in there, and there's rises and falls. You know, you have a number of great and powerful tragedies in this story, and one of them is the story of Saul, who is an embodiment of the king whom the people wanted. And Saul comes in and he fails to achieve. And that brings in the need for David. Now, you have to tell all of that story, right? You have to tell the story of at least some point of it, Saul's fall as David's rises. And you have all the people around Saul that was in his rise, that there's a number of them that play elements in David's story. And as David comes up, there's a host of people around him, both men and women alike. You have from his family, there's a number of prominent people in his family that have powerful stories. Joab, for instance, or his brothers like Eliab. And then you have people like Benaiah, and you have people like Jashobeam, and these men and their stories around him that are equally powerful. And those stories aren't generally told, or if they're told, they're anecdotal. So, for example, the great tragedy of Uriah. Uriah's tragedy is a powerful story in itself, and when you factor in some of the Jewish legends and things that surround that, you have this young man who longed for love, and that longing for love, in essence, one could argue that he kind of makes an idol of it, and this becomes his downfall. Now, it doesn't make it his fault what happens to him. It's not really what we're saying, nor is it part of the story we're telling, but he has this longing for love, and he desires a bride. And as he comes along David and rise up, he gets that. But this thing that he gets ends up turning around on him. And on account, he loses his life. And so this is a powerful story in and of itself. And it's not something that's ever really explored. And I've not really seen it explored before anywhere. So it's one of the elements we're going to touch upon. You're going to see this, and you're going to see a little bit about Goliath, and kind of explore maybe a little bit where he comes from. And it's part of the world building too, is the mythology. And we definitely go from the Jewish and historical sources, touching more of the Genesis 6 route and the Nephilim and what that's about, and Goliath, and just the story of the giants in general are interconnected with David's story. These figures play a role quite a lot in what David's doing in uniting his kingdom, and they keep coming up. And so it's not just a story of a giant that David slays once and that's the end and that's the rest of the story. Actually, later on in David's story, he ends up much further down the road. he gets into a battle and he's almost destroyed by a giant. And at that time, his counselors kind of tell him, hey, you need to step back and you need to focus more on being king instead of being the guy out here in the front, which is an element of David, and David's passion is that David is so with his people that he's willing to put himself out there and in danger, and they have to bring him back. And they kind of have to calm him, bring him down off the wall, and kind of draw him back and say, you need to focus on these other things. Let us focus on these things. And so there's just a lot of powerful stories that haven't really been touched on in any way. And I think this is a unique time because capitalizing on things like the David movie and the House of David series, we fill a different role. We're not really in competition with either of these things. Yeah, we're animated. That's true. Yes, we're telling a tale along the lines of House of David. It was very different, a very different perspective and focusing on different things. So the little clips like we show with like building in like Uriah's story, we really want people to grasp onto that and see these nuances and kind of grow a little bit deeper into the world in the story that we're trying to tell, and the story that's already there. We're just trying to bring these things out to light. So hopefully you enjoy.